Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Rhode Island Small Business Coalition Live Forum. I'm your host, David Dedakian, a small business owner here in Rhode Island. I own Eat, Drink Rhode Island, so it's great to have you with us and watching again this week. We've got a great guest today, one of the members of the General Assembly. Please welcome Representative Gregg Amore. He's a representative for District 65, East Providence there. Welcome, Representative.
Thank you, David. I appreciate being here.
Thank you. I should also mention, and we'll touch upon it later in the episode, but after we get on the questions, but we should also mention that Representative Amore will actually be exiting the House of Representatives come the fall as he's running for Secretary of State. So we'll get to that a little bit.
Either way, right, David?
Yeah, either way. I know that's why I said it that way. I wanted people to understand. I know sometimes in Rhode Island politics, people get confused who can stay in office or not. And I know in your case, you'll have to exit regardless of how it works. But we'll see what happens come November. But why don't let's jump right into these questions. We got a lot of things. I know you're on the House Finance Committee, which oversees the budget, and the governor has put together a bunch of items that are specific to small business in this year's budget. So I wanted to talk those through with you and get your thoughts on some of these items. Let's start with something that is always been a kind of a hot topic here, and that's the corporate minimum tax. And your thoughts on the price, the cost drop, and how do you think that might shake out for the budget this year?
Yeah, I think it has pretty broad support. The governor has proposed to lower it to 375. And that's a reflection of what type of business that impacts, right? It's our smallest businesses, or it's our businesses that are struggling to survive that will benefit the most from that type of reduction. In my decade in the General Assembly, there have been various bills that have been proposed to reduce the corporate minimum, and some have proposed to reduce it to basically administrative costs, which the argument can be made that this is that. But I think it has broad support, David. I know that people are, my colleagues are very aware of what small businesses have been through during this pandemic. So if there was ever a time to move on a reduction and acknowledge that, it's now. So, this is my 10th budget in the General Assembly, and as you know, I served as the small business chair for a few years, and we were in some forums together during that period of time. This is the first time I have seen a budget Article 8, that is solely focused on small business. There have been items in past budgets, but this is the first time we've had an article that is solely focused on small business, and I think that goes to the broad support that many of these ideas have in the General Assembly.
Well, we've been fortunate, over the last couple of years as the Small Business Coalition Forum to have had the air of Dan McKee and now being governor, to have that, like you said, to put it into the budget as an article like that is fantastic. The unfortunate side effect is, as you pointed out, how much painfully aware we are of the pain that has happened to small businesses because of the pandemic. But, any silver lining we can get, I suppose, is the way to look at that. So in talking about it with some of our members, and I want to bounce this off you, and we're going to try and advocate for this. Maybe not what will happen this session, but maybe in the future. A lot of our members have talked about, would it be possible to maybe do a tiered system for the corporate minimum tax? Smaller businesses paying less, and larger small businesses, making over $1 million in revenue or more like that, paying more. What are your thoughts on things like that?
So when I was chair of the Small Business Committee in the House, we would have some forums where we would ask small businesses to write into us, email into us, or even come in and testify. And that's a subject that came up quite often. And to me, that makes sense. A progressive level makes sense to me. I think anybody that is familiar with this thinks it makes sense. So that's something we can certainly advocate for, and has been advocated for in prior sessions. But I think it makes sense. And again, not to be repetitive, but this really goes to those businesses that this will really help. It's a difference maker for certain businesses, and that's to your point. When you move it to a progressive sliding scale, that acknowledges that. So that makes sense to me.
Great, good to hear. While we're on the topic of taxes, another item in the budget is the reducing the interest rates for delinquent taxes for folks who don't know, if you're delinquent on your taxes, you have to pay a penalty on that, obviously, and so the budget proposes lowering that penalty percentage rate. Your thoughts on that item?
Right. So it lowers it from 18% to 12%, I think.
Right.
And I've been the co-sponsor of legislation to do that for years now. And I've advocated on behalf of my constituents, my businesses in my district, who have had issues with taxation and are trying to get some relief. This makes sense. Of all of the proposals, and I think the tangible tax one, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but of all of the proposals, I believe this one has the most broad support, because people understand that businesses are doing their best to try to pay what they owe, but certainly we have to be flexible enough and we have to be reasonable enough to make sure that they're able to do that and not shut their doors. Right? I mean, nobody benefits if a business closes and people are put out of work. So if this reduction from 18% to 12% helps in doing that, then we should be on that. But I think of all of the proposals, and last year's session was truncated. We were really focused on some major things. We weren't in person, but this had support on an individual level outside of a budget article last year. So I would say that proposal is on its way.
Oh, that's very, very good to hear. Yeah, I think it's always been interesting to me. Some taxes obviously being collected by the state are better than no taxes, and yeah, if a business is gone, you're not going to get anything. So I think it's a wise move financially as well.
And I think most of the representatives and senators have dealt with businesses in their districts who are struggling prior to the pandemic,
yeah,
and want to do the best they can to make the state whole, so to speak, but just want to be worked with a little bit. And this proposal, speaks to that across the board.
Yep, agreed. Thank you. So yeah, the tangible tax. To summarize it, briefly for folks out there watching, cities and towns are able to tax businesses on physical assets that they own, and it varies from city to town. But I know many colleagues who own businesses in Providence. It can be quite a good amount every year, unfortunately. And so there's a reform proposal out there. Can you sort of give your thoughts on that? And what do you think? How do you think that would affect things?
Sure. And I think the appeal of this is that it's enabling, right? It lets the cities and towns not have to go through the General Assembly to get approval, right? The process is slow. Whenever we have a tax exempt situation, and normally it's dealing with nonprofits in our communities, the city council passes a resolution. We then hear the resolution, we hear the proposal, and it goes through the process. And the legislative process, as you know, can be cumbersome. And unfortunately, sometimes things slip through or don't get passed till the very end of a session. In a part-time legislature, there's a small window where we can do that work. So what this would do is it would allow the towns and cities to make these decisions on their own without having to get approval from the General Assembly. And I believe that's smart. They know best what their tax base is, what their businesses can afford, what their costs are going forward. In essence, if they were to have this power, it would work the same way they exempt those nonprofits that are seeking exemption. And before they pass council resolutions to exempt those nonprofits, they're doing all their homework in regard to whether or not they can afford those exemptions and whether or not that is good for their tax base, good for their bottom line. This is the same thing. The difference here is this is directly related to our small business community. It's directly related to all businesses per se, and goes across the board from service to manufacturing. To me, this is something that is long due. And the other thing it does is it allows cities and towns, to be competitive, to advertise their competitiveness, and to try to draw businesses or keep businesses that are already located. And I'm not in favor of a dog-eat-dog situation, but I do think that towns that are able to manage their budget, cities that are able to manage their budget, and do so in a way that they can make these decisions, fiscally prudent decisions. That's a positive thing.
Yeah, no, and it's a very realistic situation. I mean, we've had several mayors on this program, and yeah, I mean, they do compete to some extent. I mean, they're not obviously so much chasing small businesses in and out of towns, but when they bigger projects, things of that nature, they do compete for that. And so if they can have that flexibility, I think to attract a larger small business by changing the tangible tax, it's certainly a very valid way to do it.
And they know best what they can handle. They know
Exactly.
best what their budget looks like.
Right.
It gets sent to us after the process that I described. And by and large on those, this has not been sent to us because it's not into law yet. But by and large on the exemptions that we face, we're rubber stamping those exemptions because the council has approved almost
Right.
all the time unanimously. And so this would be the same process. And I see no reason why we wouldn't give them this flexibility.
That's great. Well, I think that was the three. Oh no, there is one more under taxes, and that's the full-time person at taxation, the Taxpayer Steward proposal. That's a person at the Division of Taxation to assist businesses and individuals. It's not just for businesses, but helping people through the tax process. What are your thoughts on a role like that?
Years ago, we would refer to this as the concierge, right?
Yeah, right. Yep.
And you can remember, David, that we did that with Quonset, right? So
that's right. Yep.
In order to, so I'm aging myself here. 10 years in the General Assembly has me able to answer these questions and make comparisons. But we did that with Quonset, where we created a liaison for development and for opening businesses in Quonset. And so you had one-stop shopping if you were looking to either go into Quonset Point or expand in Quonset Point. And this is along those same lines. It's a concierge, it's an advocate, whatever you want to call it. It's someone that can kind of hold your hand and guide you through the process, answer questions. And it's an attempt to be more consumer friendly, service friendly, business friendly. And we should do everything we can to do that. It always comes down to what the cost of the office is and what it looks like in reality. But in my view, something like this, just as the situation in Quonset, it helps, right? It pays for itself in the end. And so if you can have someone who is able, and you pointed this out prior to this, that collecting some tax is better than collecting no tax. Having businesses open is better than having their doors shut. And if this individual, this office can help do that, then we should certainly explore that. Let's see what the cost is. We don't want to grow the size of our departments where we're unable to staff them or unable to pay for them year in and year out. But I think something like this offers an opportunity for it to pay for itself.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think one full-time employee should be able to have its costs covered by doing this. Yes, that's everything on the taxation part of it. Let's talk to something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I working with the food sector. There's a cottage food licensing. Now that is also, I think people need to understand that the governor proposed that in his budget to fund employees in the Department of Health to allow them to have safety and oversight for cottage food. That means foods made at home for people to sell to consumers. But that also has to pass the House and the Senate as its own separate bill. Have you had much experience with that yet? I mean, I've had a lot of discussions with different representatives and senators about it myself over the last year or two while we've been trying to get this through. But what's your thoughts there?
I mean, I haven't had much experience with it, but I do know we're an outlier.
We are the only state out of all 50. So outliers and understatement, unfortunately.
Right. So whenever we're an outlier, and forget being the singular, then we should look to address that. It's not very normal that when you're an outlier, you're exceptional, right? It's usually on the other side of the scale. So I don't think I think the impetus originally was to protect consumers, right? It's a public health safety issue. But I think the way this is crafted and how it's restricted and limited, I don't think public safety is at risk here. And so it's one of those ideas that has come long ago.
Yeah,
we should probably move on now. And again, I haven't had much experience with actual folks that do this or operate like this, but in reading the budget proposal and hearing about this in years past, if we're the only state that is not accommodating these type of small businesses, then we need to adjust.
Yeah, and not to get too much on my soapbox, but it's a path again. If someone starts a small business in their home, the hope is that they're going to grow to the size that they will pay more taxes, pay the licenses and fees that they need to be in a commercial space, and so on and so forth. So again, it should be a good revenue driver as times.
Regulations are important. But,
yes,
they shouldn't get in the way of entrepreneurship, right? So we need to keep people safe, and we need to make sure that there are safe working standards. We need to make sure the public is protected as to what they ingest and the cleanliness, et cetera. But as I look at this proposal, I think it meets all those measures and allows for what you just described, basically an incubator into what we hope would be an expanded business.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Another item in this small business agenda in the budget is to-go drinks, and actually that's going up in front of the Small Business Committee tonight in the House. But it also needs to be approved in the budget for finance. What are your thoughts on takeout drinks? Have you actually used it yourself, or
I haven't? The younger me would have really appreciated that. But it was smart to do when we did it, because it threw a life raft to so many restaurants and hospitality. Yes. So it was smart to do when we did it. I haven't really listened to the pushback from the liquor stores or the distributors, but just speaking off the top of my head yet, and I will listen to that testimony and hear. And I haven't received anything from the liquor stores or representatives of liquor stores either. But it seems to me that that's a separate market.
It is.
I don't think, and again, off the top of my head, without having listened to the testimony yet, I don't think those markets intersect all that much. And I don't think liquor stores would be adversely affected by us making this a permanent option for folks.
It shouldn't. Yeah. And just
that's my instinct. That's not anything that I've seen data wise or heard from lobbyists or owners. It's just my instinct.
No, it's good instinct, because just to educate, by nature, restaurants mark up liquor and wine much more than a retail location, because there's much different overhead and all those factors that go into it. And it's part of the bill. I just reviewed it this morning because, as I said, it's going to the Small Business Committee this evening. That a restaurant has to sell whatever they're charging for a bottle of wine in the restaurant. They'd have to charge for a bottle of wine to do for takeout, which is much more than that same bottle of wine would be in a retail store. So, if someone decides to make that choice and make that purchase, so be it. That's their money to do that purchase. But it's not really, no one's choosing to go to a restaurant over a liquor store, and make a purchase at double the price, or
it doesn't
60% more the price.
It doesn't seem to intersect.
Yeah. The one piece of the bill that I do think is interesting that I've seen pushback on, and I'm hoping we can, if not again this session, maybe next session, is it doesn't allow for delivery. And having seen the growth of delivery systems in the last couple of years, and having seen many liquor delivery systems grow in the last couple of years, I think leaving that out is an odd piece of the puzzle that really could, unfortunately take away some of the revenue that restaurants and bars could receive. So I'm hoping that we get delivery back into there. Any thoughts there with delivery versus? And
I'm ignorant to what the impetus to remove that from the option would be. I mean, it seems to me that that's an even safer option. Right.
It should be, yeah, absolutely, and right. That's my mind. Yeah, I mean,
I can't speak intelligently as to why that would not be included, but it seems to me that delivering alcohol somewhere is probably a better option, safety wise.
Yeah, I think when you say it out loud, you realize that safety wise it is much better. I think there are some entities in the state that have some considerable sway when these bills are made, and it's always a compromise and a conversation. So I think it's good to have that. So I think that's all the items there. Let's talk about a hot topic that we brought up many times with different brought it up with the speaker and also with the Senate president. What do you think is going to happen with marijuana this session? Do we see something moving forward? Do you have any thoughts on the plans that are being presented?
I never speak definitively on this subject because
I understand that.
I've spoken definitively on it before, and I've let people down. I've been a sponsor of the legalization and control bill since I entered the General Assembly. So, I think we're really close. I do think that there's and let me connect this to something else. We've received a settlement on the opioid side of things, right? And I think that settlement's going to even grow in the future. And so one of the major concerns of folks who were opposed to legalization was we don't have the capacity right now in this state to take folks who are struggling with substance abuse into an inpatient situation. Well, I think we're approaching a time because of the settlement that we'll be able to expand our ability to treat and help treat those folks who have substance abuse and addiction. And so, while we're talking about different drugs here, opioids and marijuana, we do know that many of the people who are opposed to legalization say we don't do enough to deal with drug abuse to begin with, and now we're going to enter this into the everyday lives of Rhode Islanders. But I think maybe this opioid settlement can help ease some of those concerns. And here's the reality: if we don't move on it, we're closing opportunity to our own citizens that exists already around us. And for those folks that say that the social ills are what concerns them, the workplace is what concerns them, we already own that. I mean, those social ills are here already. People can go to Fall River and at Seacon, wherever, and buy edibles. That's already here, and the black market still exists, right? In fact, this would tamper that for sure. So I don't really buy into the idea that there's a social issue that we aren't already dealing with, and that we haven't been dealing with for quite some time. So it does offer opportunity, right, for retail. It offers opportunity in the growth area. It offers opportunity in HVAC systems. It's all electricians. I mean, the ancillary benefits to expanding or legalizing are tremendous. My early years in the General Assembly, I was sent out to Denver to explore their industry. And we're fortunate that we can create something here with all the lessons learned from all the states who have already done this. And we should be able to avoid the pitfalls that Colorado faced and others faced, and really get to something that works. Anybody that thinks that this is going to be a revenue boom, there's going to be revenue for sure that doesn't exist now. But I think the ancillary benefits are which is indirect revenue, which we don't measure by the revenue based on taxation, is significant. It is significant. And so I've always been an advocate, and I think we're really close, but I don't want to say definitively if this is the session, but I think we're really close.
Yeah, no, I understand. We don't want to assume, but I mean, when, you drive down the highway, you see the billboards, you realize that the money that's going into Massachusetts, it seems like a funny topic in some ways, but it is a small business topic. A lot of these businesses that are popping up are smaller businesses. Like you mentioned, growth. I think there's a huge market in agriculture. That's a possibility. I didn't even think it until you said it. Obviously, indoor agriculture would be a big benefit to HVAC systems, things of that nature. So, to see these as based on the financing, situation, a way forward to more profits, without it leaving our state, it's the way to go. So hopefully we see some progress on it.
And look, there's a lot of concerns. You want to make sure it's done equitably. You want to make sure that it's a fair process. You want to make sure that no one's locked out of it who can seek that opportunity and can work hard. So there are a lot of things to deal with when you're passing such legislation. But it's time, and I believe the votes exist. It's a matter of finding that compromise that everybody can live with and moving forward.
Great. The other big topic that has come up many times in our conversations in these interviews is the Arpa funds, and we touched on a lot of small business items that are in the budget. But do you see other things, looking towards the future, other plans that ARPA could come into play and that would help small business and things of that nature, or is it still too early to say with some of these things? So
my initial response to the first money that we have spent towards small businesses of the ARPA money, so the $12.5 million down payment, right? But I think it's called Rhode Island Rebounds, right?
Yep.
So my first instinct is let's see if that's oversubscribed. And then we can go back to that. This money still exists. While the governor stakes out his budget and looks to spend this money in various ways, and the General Assembly has some ideas outside of that. This is something that we are doing right now, right? The application just opened up February 1st. It'll go to the middle of the month. Let's see where the subscription is there. Let's see how that works and if we've left behind folks who legitimately need that help. Same can be said about the labor shortage issue. Let's see if labor starts to tick back, especially in the service industries, and let's reserve some of this ARPA funding to see if we can't continue with some direct relief. I think that's the first and smartest thing to do. Is yes, we have this down payment. Yes, we're in the process of processing these applications. Let's see what the demand is. Let's see how it works. And it's my hunch that more is probably going to be needed. And so let's not close the door on that. Look, I think that in general, spending this money on improving systems, improving infrastructure, improving housing. There's a proposal to have one medical database to improve the state's ability in many departments in regard to technology upgrades. All of those things help small business, right? If we can function better as a state, then that in turn helps small business. So I think a lot of these things, and then we've got the federal infrastructure money that's on its way as well. Again, the better our infrastructure is, the more open we are to travel, the more beneficial that is to small businesses. So without coming up with a large program, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that too, I think we should first look at what we've done to try to aid businesses in their time of need, and we're still in their time of need. See if we can't, if that doesn't need some more of that ARPA funding to take care of what is not satisfied by this first round. Look at those issues regarding labor shortages and see if we can't incentivize a little more there or do something that can get people back to work and back in these businesses who are struggling so much to hire. And, my family owns multiple small businesses, so I'm not unaware of the challenges that exist and have existed and what it takes to survive. And that's, all hands on deck and all options. It's,
right.
It's one of those things that if you can make it through the storm, usually you have a good run after you get through that storm. And so we've got to make sure, and the storm's been long, and we've got to make sure that people get through that storm.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, the labor issue is perplexing. It really is a very perplexing thing. And I know we've had conversations with Matt Weldon, the director of labor and training there. And I know, he's focused very much on it. So hopefully we see a path out of the problems soon. Regarding,
I've had those conversations with Matt too, and it is perplexing. I mean, some of it is the result of people skilling up, and that's good. That's positive.
Yeah, it is good. Right.
And that will shake itself out, right?
Yeah.
Some of it is, the baby boomers finally leaving the workforce, right? A lot of them were still in the workforce part-time, in some cases to keep themselves busy, in some cases, extra income. And I think the pandemic has moved them out of the workforce full-time. So you have this perfect storm. And hopefully we can see some back to normalcy approaching in the next months next 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, hope so. Regarding the 12.5 million, the Small Business Coalition worked on the grant program with Commerce. And for those of you out there who haven't gone to commerceri.com and applied for the grant, you should. You really should. It's a very simple application process. I went through it several times in testing phase and made sure it was very easy. I did hear this morning that there are almost 2,000 applications so far. So it's not all used up yet. Probably, like you mentioned, it's going to go for another week. So probably we'll get, or 6 more days, probably will get all used up, which is, again, a sign that we really are in need. And I know there's a large chunk of that money is also set aside for tourism and travel and hospitality. And that hasn't even been decided. Commerce hasn't gotten to that program yet. Hopefully they get to that very soon, because that industry is in a lot of pain.
No question. Although, we do start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I've been speaking to folks in that industry, and there are summer bookings that are happening that did not happen in previous years. And cross your fingers. I hope we can move out of this Omicron toward toward a more normal summertime and into the fall. But I have talked with folks in the industry, and they are seeing advanced reservations that they did not see last year, and so that's a good sign. But yeah, I think we have to be really nimble with this ARPA money, and if we can, the best way to spend it is investment, and this is one-time investment. That's what I look at it as. If you can save and prop up small businesses, that's an investment. If you can invest in housing so that people can afford to live here and move here, that's an investment. These technological investments that I talked about, I think that's the path. I mean, I know we've had about $12 billion worth of requests for the $1.2 billion in total. Yeah. And I understand that for certain. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I think the governor's budget is sober. I think it attacks this money in a very sober way. We're going to have differences on some of the money and some of the programs, and it'll go through the process, but by and large, it's sober, and it tries to attack the problem without giving us out year issues in our budget. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, because you don't want to create something and fill a hole, and then 5 years down the road not have the money to continue filling that hole.
Yeah, and if you do, and there may be programs that we think are valuable. I like, if we do that, then we've got a plan for that in the out year budgets. It's got to be in those budgets.
Yep. Absolutely. No, you're right. So talking about some of those really hurt industries, we've very much been in the news this week. The mask mandate, it's looking like it's going to come to an end. It's supposed to come to an end on Monday. We at the Small Business Coalition have been pushing to try and get it to pull back a few more days so that we can have a little bit livelier Valentine's and Super Bowl weekend. I think a lot of that is it's not so much about safety. I think people are being safe when I was out last night and people are wearing masks when they're walking around and things of that nature. But I think some of it is consumer confidence. What are your thoughts on where we are going with the mask mandates and that process for the next few weeks?
Well, I would agree that consumer confidence is a big deal, right? When the government announces that any restriction is either off or reduced, et cetera, then that sends a message that, the public health professionals who advise the government are on board with that. And then that makes people feel better about going to a restaurant, going to a concert, et cetera. So yes, I would agree with that. Look, I spend my days in a public school.
I was going to say, I know you're a teacher. We hadn't touched on that yet, but I know you're very much in it. My wife's a school teacher as well. So and I think people who are, setting the mask politics aside, right? I think people who are in a school every day know that the challenges to teaching. I don't think the challenges are as extreme as they're being made out to be, but I don't think those concerns should be diminished because they're real. Like everything else, it's somewhere in the middle. But I think as you see the numbers go down, and we are seeing precipitous drops in cases, hospitalizations, then it's smart to get rid of the mask mandate so that if we do have an uptick in the winter, in the fall, we're able to legitimately talk to people about,
we're going to have to mask up for a month here just to get through
Yeah.
this wave. And then, we have credibility. If we're going to do this, just because we think that there may be something on the horizon, we lose that credibility. And what I've seen, and what I've read, and this is nationwide, is even medical professionals who have been very, very stringent on their advocacy for masks are starting to say it's okay to pull back. It's okay to learn how to live with the risk that exists right now. And look, we still want people who are at risk to protect themselves. And that should be a message we send as well, that, you have to be responsible for protecting yourself as well, and do the right thing. But I think we're the door is almost open to us being out of the mask mandate situation from all accounts. And, and teachers are tough, and I'm a teacher. I love teachers. I think they do God's work. They would let you know if they think that this is not wise. And I'm not hearing that. I'm not hearing broad-based, if we get rid of the mask mandate, I'm in trouble. And I'm not hearing that from my colleagues. I was hearing that from my colleagues at the beginning of the school year.
Sure.
So I'm not hearing that now, except there are exceptions to everything I'm saying, of course. But by and large, microcosmically, I'm hearing that people are ready for this next move. And that certainly helps your industry, because, like I said, that announcement, that headline, that social media feed lets people know, look, we're easing this because there's reason to ease it. Our hospitalizations are lower, our transmission is lower.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, we have to, like you said, exceptions are, always going to be possible, and we have to be flexible with things like that. But like, we've got to keep moving forward. And
I think, David, you could probably speak to this better than I can, but I think by and large, people have been really, really compliant and really accommodating. And, despite what we might see as highlighted areas of insanity, most people kind of have gone about their business and adjusted accordingly, and done what they can, and been respectful of, the customer, the business, the concerns. So it's a hard time, and people are struggling overall, and hopefully we can kind of move out of this, and like I said, I've said a couple of times, get back to normalcy.
Yeah, I think it's an important point to make. It's a very vocal minority, unfortunately, that argue some of these points, and most people just, you put on a mask, you go about your business, you take your mask off. I think we've all come to realize. Almost in some ways, I haven't had a cold in 2 years, so I kind of want to wear my mask to the grocery store forever.
There are some benefits, and look, people will. Our concern in education is, the younger kids. We want to make sure that they're comfortable wearing their masks if they have to, based on, some pre-existing conditions or somebody at home, and make sure they're not, ostracized or picked on, or any of the things that can happen with young kids who don't have the full understanding. But we're approaching a time where the windows can, get back open in late March. And so it's time. And we see Connecticut and New Jersey making these announcements. And I know we're not far behind.
Right. Yeah. It's
and
like,
that's,
as it moves further north, we get warmer. Yeah. And then, back
the
the other
funny
way.
part about that is that's aside from the state of emergency, right? People have talked about the state of emergency as if it's masks.
Sometimes.
Only.
Yeah.
We have labor shortage issues that are being addressed by the state of emergency right now in our state hospitals, in our schools, where retirees are serving in key roles to make sure there's capacity to do these important jobs that cannot be legislated quickly. Without the state of emergency, those teachers, healthcare professionals who are working for the state after already have been retired for some years, they're filling key roles right now. And the legislature doesn't move quick enough to do that and then reverse it and still, apply to the statute in regard to the pension system. So there's a whole host of things outside of masks that a state of emergency extension deals with that nobody talks about.
No, it's true. People look at the big topic and forget there's a lot of nuance sometimes. So thank you for that. Before we get into our last topic, Ben, I wanted to check, do we have any questions on the Facebook feed for Representative Amore? Here we go. Here we go. A City of East Providence question. Are there any grants for small businesses in the city? Do you know of anything going on there?
Yes. And the city's website has those grants. I don't know if those funds have been exhausted or if they've been replenished. But I know both my family's business and many businesses in my district have taken advantage of the East Providence small business grants.
Excellent. So we'll check out the East Providence city website. That's key. And Hugo with the question. Thank you for that question, Jen. Hugo here. We can't forget how our children have been impacted with masking and cancellation of after-school events. I would love to see investments made out of the Arpa Funds. So yeah, can we look forward to perhaps some after-school or maybe preschool, before-school programs as well with Arpa Funds? What do you think there?
So one of the hats I wear is as athletic administrator in the district. So I'm a teacher and athletic administrator, and we are having a full-fledged East Providence basketball game tonight against Rogers, and we're going to fill our stands.
Excellent.
And, I think it's important that kids are in school. I've always thought that. We learned during the pandemic that we need to get kids in school. Many of our districts have spent CARES Act money and federal educational funding on improving their infrastructure, their air quality infrastructure, whether it be purchasing air purifiers or changing their HVAC systems out. A lot of districts have done that. And I think that's a wise investment going forward, because, this is not going to be the last time we see something that will affect public health that is spread through the air. So
Right.
that's wise. But I think we need to get, and we in East Providence anyway, we have restricted attendance at some events, but not closed it. So we've tried to get people in to these events so that life is back to normal and kids can experience what they should experience. And so, yes, after school activities, when we can do them and do them safely, and I think we can do them safely at this point, we should do them.
Great. Any other questions there, Ben? Looks like it from Facebook. So as I mentioned at the top of the show, I want to give you the opportunity. You're running for Secretary of State. At the moment, unopposed, but I'm sure that'll change. If people don't know, the deadline for being candidate is the end of June.
Right.
So there's still plenty of time for other people to get involved. But why don't you give us a quick pitch for us before we.
Sure. And people think of the Secretary of State as the person who runs the elections in the state, right? Prepares
That's
the
one
ballot.
part. Yeah, there's a lot more, right?
But we know that, small businesses have interaction with the Secretary of State's office on a daily basis, right? It's the home office for those business records, for registration. Right. The Secretary of State's office does a great deal in training for people who are going to open small businesses, for nonprofits, for people who have questions in regard to how to expand small business. So the office has a great role in the small business community. Many of our cities and towns use it and the databases to do the work they do on behalf of small businesses. So, yeah, David, I think the skill set is good for me as someone who's been on the finance committee, someone who has chaired the small business committee, someone who has a good knowledge of that side of the office. And then coming from my background as a U.S. history teacher and civics and government teacher, the job is the civic engagement officer for the state.
Yeah.
I spent 28 years teaching advanced placement U.S. history and civics. I've sponsored many of bills, and we've got many of them passed that expand our civic education. So, I looked at this as a time where I've served my community in the General Assembly. I'd like to continue to serve the state as I approach, the latter part, the fall of my life. I'd like to keep serving the state, and this is a good way for me to do so.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I certainly wish you the best of luck with that. It's been great having you on the show today. It's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Thank you very much for being here. Representative Gregg Amore, also a candidate for Secretary of State for the election coming up in the fall. So thanks again for all of you out there watching us. This has been a really great program. I really enjoyed that conversation. Let me let you know about the guests coming up on the show. Our next guest is Representative Barbara Ann Fenton Fung. Then we have Representative Scott Slater, James Muchler from SCORE RI, Doris De Los Santos from the Center of Women in Enterprise, Tomas Avila from the Rhode Island Office of Diversity, Equity, Opportunity, and then Representative Blake Filippi. Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea will be on the show in the middle of May. So please make sure you check out that, because as we know, Secretary of State Gorbea is also running for governor. And then we have Senator Jessica De La Cruz, who has also announced she's running for Congressional District 2. And Representative Karen Alzate is going to be with us in June. So we have a lot of great folks coming up, a lot of people running for office. This is an election year. So if you want to ask questions to our candidates, this is also a spot for that. As always, Go to rismallbusiness.org to sign up for the Small Business Coalition. And thanks again for watching. And thank you again to our guest, Representative Gregg Amore.